Four Flamingo missiles struck at the heart of Russian combat aircraft production. One of them passed right through the workshop and exploded outside. How did it happen? I'll show you the photos, Sans. What exactly is this Skif-M that we targeted? Why can't the Su-34 and Su-57 fly without it? And why did real sanctions for this enterprise come not from Brussels or Washington, but from the sky? And they are more reliable. Let me tell you everything in a moment, but first, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and leave your comments. This is very important for the growth of the community, so to save time, let's get started right away. So, what happened? What happened is that, in fact, on September 23rd, 2025, the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck Belgorod. At first, it was reported to be the Belgorod FRES plant. Satellite images and the meticulous work of analysts from the Cyber and Excel Nova Plus projects revealed a different picture. The target was Skif-M. At this particular point in time, it is absolutely necessary to immediately explain the situation in much greater detail. Why is that? It would certainly seem to an outside observer that we struck on September 23rd of last year, and yet it is only now, many months later, that we're finally mentioning it to everyone. It has only now become clear that four missiles, specifically four Flamingo missiles, hit the target directly. It took this much time precisely to fully verify this information. So four Flamingo cruise missiles hit exactly there at the Skif-M, and one of them showed an especially impressive result because it went straight through the roof and the wall of the workshop, exited outside, and only then exploded. Just imagine the sheer force of the explosion. After that, there was practically nothing left at the site, and a massive fire broke out in the workshop immediately. And here's a photo, by the way, as you can see, before and after. Take a look, please. And here you can see the actual result for yourself. What else is interesting? These published images show that 3 out of the 4 damaged sections of the roof had already been dismantled, meaning they were probably being prepared for repairs. But photos taken on January 26th of this year, so quite recently, indicate that at that time, the roof repairs had not yet been completed. This may actually indicate significant internal damage to the facility itself. And the main question is, why is this plant so important in the first place? In other words, why did we target it? The answer comes from the authoritative Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies in the United Kingdom. And so, friends, among the vulnerable points in the production of Sukhoi aircraft, they specifically highlight Skif-M. Please take a look at this photo. This is what was actually there just a few hours after the strike itself. Flamingo. This is not just a factory, as it might seem at first glance. It is a manufacturer of specialized tools, unique drills, reamers, and cutters for material processing. It should be noted that 70% of its products are made specifically for the aerospace industry. Its main client is the United Aircraft Corporation, or UAC as it is called. Pay attention, it is the one that produces those very Su-34, Su-35, and Su-57 aircraft. Just take a moment to see how this works. The main factory in Belgorod manufactures the specialized tool. The subsidiary company, Skif-M is located in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, literally just 2 blocks away from the KN-8's plant. This is where these very fighter jets are assembled. Without these special drills and milling tools, it is impossible to process the strong titanium and aluminum composite parts of modern aircraft. It's basically like a surgical instrument for aircraft manufacturers, just to make it easier to understand. The paradox is that before the strike, only Ukraine had imposed sanctions against this company. But the real sanctions were imposed precisely by the Ukrainians. Flamingo, as you understand. This is what real sanctions actually look like. Now, friends, a bit about the Flamingo missile itself. In the process of its creation, there are new details. Western media, the Wall Street Journal and BBC, gained rare access to the manufacturer. In fact, it was more like a thriller, the way journalists were brought there. I'll tell you more about it at the Firepoint Company. So the journalists visited the workshops and shared some fresh details with us. They were brought in there with their eyes blindfolded. Their phones were taken away. They weren't allowed to photograph anything, especially the windows, ceilings, and so on. In other words, everything was kept as secret as possible. Why? You'll find out in a moment. So, what do the journalists tell us about the missile itself? They spoke with the manufacturers and say that, first of all, there's the range. The range is over 3,000 kilometers. It is compared to the Russian calibers, the KH-101. And this makes it possible to strike deep into the territory of the Russian Federation. Next, the design. Here, new details emerge because it's large, it has a powerful fuel tank, and a jet engine from old Soviet aircraft. It resembles the German V-1 from World War II, but it's much smarter, as you can imagine. The missile was created on a limited budget. That should also be mentioned. Engineers use open source controllers that can be freely found online for $500,000. They deliberately avoid components from the US and China so that no one can influence the weapon. You understand, right? We go and buy components there, so to speak. If it's the USA or the People's Republic of China, they understand this and can simply cut off our supplies as a means of leverage. And then we're left without missiles because there are no components. That's why all components are produced and purchased exclusively in Ukraine. Each missile is manufactured to order for the armed forces of Ukraine, says the company's technical director, and it is launched within 2 days after production is completed. So 2 days after the missile is made, it's already flying toward Russian territory. At the same time, the company Firepoint strives to utilize all available knowledge in Ukraine. They say that what we're doing now is studying all the manuals on creating those very Soviet missiles, even the old ones. We need absolutely everything. He participated in the Soviet missile program. This is a good story, a great example of how everything needs to be combined. In other words, it's a symbiosis here. We need weapons that are fast, cheap, and effective. The Flamingo missile. These are our criteria, our priorities. What do we have here? Secrecy and scale? The Firepoint factories have already been bombed twice by the Russians. This isn't a secret. The management of Firepoint itself talked about it, so they operate on a duplication principle. There's always a backup production line. Now, they plan to produce up to 7 missiles a day, and this actually shows that it's not just something theoretical. It's no longer just a startup. It's a real industry that emerged after 2022. Still, when we're told that 7 missiles are being produced a day, we want to see results, right? Because, well, listen, I also feel a bit uncomfortable, for example, making this material and talking about almost idolizing this missile. I'm not up there somewhere in the clouds. I'll be honest with you, friends. I don't see any results from the Flamingo. Yes, 4 missiles hit, they landed, they destroyed something. There's a factory that's extremely important to the Russians, and basically, whether their aviation will be able to fly or not depends on it. But that was back in September 2025. So much time has already passed. We need results now, especially if there are 7 missiles a day. And although the Flamingo project is still ongoing, experts such as Fabian Hoffman, a very well-known nuclear weapons expert, say that the emergence of Ukraine's own defense industry capable of producing long-range weapons is already an important achievement, because this way we can keep harassing the Russian Federation. So, look, friends, this strike is part of a larger strategy. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, says that such strikes have already cost the Russian economy tens of billions of dollars last year. The goal is to reduce the military and economic potential of the enemy. But we have to face the truth. Let's be honest. Russia responds with much more powerful shelling of our energy infrastructure and cities, and we need to do something about it. Why are Flamingo and other domestically produced weapons a matter of survival? Because the current peace negotiations with Russia, despite all the optimistic announcements, do not bring us the main thing. They do not bring peace. And that's why producing our own long-range weapons is the only real way to ensure security guarantees. Just look at the current policy of the United States. We can't afford to depend on partners and allies there. Ukraine understands from its own experience that the ultimate guarantee for us is a strong army of our own and our own defense industry. Europe is now trying to fill this gap, but the lesson from the US is not obvious to everyone. Governments change, priorities change. We cannot depend on our allies. So what do we end up with? Ukraine is capable of identifying and striking extremely important, non-obvious links in the enemy's military-industrial complex, such as the Skif-M special tools plant. But this needs to be done constantly. If we have 7 missiles a day, then let's launch them every time. Next, the Flamingo missile has essentially become a symbol of Ukrainian engineering thought and ingenuity during this time. This is a weapon created in wartime conditions to reduce our dependence. And this is part of a systematic effort. Work to strengthen our own defense industry in order to strike at the economic and military power of the aggressor. Now we need to demonstrate this. The strike on Skif-M is not just news about a single destroyed center. Friends, this is a story about how Ukraine is learning to strike the enemy not only on the battlefield, but also on the assembly line, where the enemy tries to create its own advantage and does so with its own resources. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. Thank you for liking and leaving a comment. What do you think about Flamingo, friends? I understand there will be a lot of comments, and they will be mixed. Some will criticize, and that's fair, and some will praise, which is also fair. Let's discuss everything we've just heard together in the chat below this video. Take care of yourselves, and see you next time.